The transport shuttle docked with a soft hiss at the Galactic Medical Academy's main port. Inside, a young human sat nervously, watching through the window as the massive orbital station came into view. The station was beautiful, all smooth curves and glowing lights, nothing like the rough military hospitals back on Earth where she had trained. She grabbed her small bag and stepped out into the corridor. The air smelled strange, like flowers mixed with something metallic. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved past her, some floating, some walking on multiple legs, some she couldn't even describe. None of them looked human. A tall, thin alien approached her. Its body was made of what looked like pale blue crystal, and it moved with careful, precise steps. "You are the human student?" it asked. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "Yes, that's me," she replied, trying to sound confident. "I'm here for the exchange program." "I am Thesix," the crystal alien said. "I will show you to our study group. Please follow me." They walked through pristine white hallways. Everything was so clean it almost hurt to look at. Back on Earth, hospitals always had the smell of disinfectant and the sound of beeping machines. Here, everything was quiet and peaceful, almost too peaceful. Thesix led her into a large classroom with circular tables. Two other aliens were already there. One looked like it was made of water, constantly shifting and changing shape inside a containment suit. The other was insect-like, with multiple arms and huge compound eyes that reflected light in rainbow colors. "This is Kelrix," Thesix said, pointing to the water creature. "And this is Zixtik." The insect alien waved several hands in greeting. The human introduced herself and sat down at the table. The chair automatically adjusted to her body shape, which was both helpful and unsettling. "We have heard stories about humans," Zixtik said in a clicking, buzzing voice. "Your planet is classified as a Class 9 death world. Only 12 known species come from such dangerous environments." "Is it true your world has diseases that can kill in days?" Kelrix asked, their watery form rippling with what might have been curiosity or fear. The human nodded. "Yes, but we've learned to deal with most of them. We have vaccines and treatments in—" "Vaccines?" Thesix interrupted. "You mean you deliberately expose yourselves to weakened diseases? That seems aggressive." "It's prevention," the human explained. "Better to prepare the body for a fight than wait until the disease is already winning." The three aliens exchanged glances. She couldn't read their expressions, but something about their body language suggested concern. A professor entered the room, another crystalline being like Thesix, but larger and more complex in structure. "Welcome, students. Today we begin your training in advanced medical care. As you know, our academy represents the finest healing traditions in the galaxy. We believe in minimal intervention, patience, and allowing the body to heal itself with gentle assistance." The professor activated a holographic display showing various medical tools. They all looked delicate and precise, more like jewelry than medical instruments. "Modern medicine requires a soft touch. We never cause unnecessary trauma to our patients. Even the smallest incision is avoided if possible." The human raised her hand. "What about emergency situations, when there's no time for gentle methods?" The professor's crystalline body seemed to dim slightly. "True medical emergencies are rare among civilized species, and when they occur, we have stasis fields to freeze time while we work carefully." "But what if the stasis fails? What if you have multiple patients and limited resources?" "Then we must maintain our standards," the professor said firmly. "What separates us from animals is our ability to remain civilized even under pressure. We do not resort to barbarism simply because circumstances are difficult." The human wanted to argue but stayed quiet. This was her first day. She needed to learn their ways before challenging them. The class continued with demonstrations of various techniques. Everything involved scanners, energy fields, and molecular manipulation. Nothing involved actually touching the patient directly if it could be avoided. The aliens seemed almost afraid of physical contact with injuries. During a break, Zixtik approached her. "Tell me, what is medical training like on your world?" The human thought about her first day in the emergency room. The blood, the screaming, the frantic race against time. "Different," she said carefully. "We train in simulations, but we also work with real patients very early. We learn to make fast decisions." "Fast decisions often lead to mistakes," Thesix observed, joining the conversation. "Or they save lives," the human countered. "Sometimes you don't have time to be perfect. You just have to be good enough, quick enough." "That sounds terrifying," Kelrick said, their watery forms shivering. An alarm suddenly blared through the station. Red lights flashed in the hallways. The professor's voice came over the intercom, tight with stress. "All students report to the main medical bay immediately. This is not a drill." The four students rushed through the corridors. Other aliens were running too, all heading in the same direction. The human's heart pounded. She recognized that tone in the professor's voice. Something bad had happened. They arrived at the medical bay to find chaos. A training simulation had gone wrong. Robotic dummies lay on tables, but they were programmed to respond like real patients, complete with artificial blood and vital signs. Several had crashed, their readings going haywire. "Begin triage procedures," the professor commanded. "Remember your training, careful assessment before any action." The students spread out. Thesix approached the first dummy, pulling out a scanner. They moved slowly, methodically, checking every reading twice before making notes. The human went to another dummy. Its readings showed massive internal bleeding and dropping blood pressure. The simulation was realistic, too realistic. She could see the timer counting down, showing how much time before system failure. Her hands moved on instinct. She grabbed supplies from a nearby cart and started working, her training taking over. She needed to stop the bleeding, needed to restore blood pressure, needed to act now. "What are you doing?" Thesix called out, alarmed. "You haven't completed the initial assessment." "There's no time," the human shot back, her hands working quickly. "It's losing pressure too fast." "But the protocol will let it die." The human's voice was sharp now. She'd seen this scenario before, back on Earth. Real people died when doctors moved too slowly. She applied pressure to the simulated wound, working to stabilize the dummy's vital signs. It was aggressive, rough, nothing like the gentle methods she'd seen all day. But it worked. The readings began to stabilize. The other students had stopped to watch her. She could feel their eyes, feel their shock at her methods. When she finally looked up, even the professor was staring at her with what might have been horror. You just..." Zixtik couldn't finish the sentence. "I saved it," the human said simply. "Isn't that what matters?" The professor's crystalline form flickered with complex colors she couldn't interpret. "We need to discuss this. All of you, dismissed. Except you, human. We need to talk about acceptable medical practices." As the other students filed out, the human caught Thesix looking back at her. The crystal alien's expression was unreadable, but she thought she saw something there. Fear, maybe, or perhaps something else. The door closed, and she was alone with the professor. Outside, she could hear alarms still echoing through the station. Real alarms this time, not simulated ones. Something told her this was just the beginning. The alarm that had been echoing in the distance suddenly became deafening. The professor's crystalline body went rigid, colors flashing across its surface in patterns the human couldn't understand. The intercom crackled to life with urgent voices speaking in multiple alien languages. "All medical personnel to Docking Bay 7. Repeat, all medical personnel to Docking Bay 7. Mass casualty event. Cargo vessel collision with incoming debris. Multiple species injured." The professor turned to the human, then seemed to make a decision. "Come with me, quickly." They ran through the corridors, joined by other medical staff and students. The human could see the three members of her study group ahead. Thessex's crystalline form caught the emergency lights, making them look like a moving prism. Kelrick's flowed faster in their containment suit than she thought possible. Zixtik's many legs carried them in a strange, rapid scuttle. When they reached the docking bay, the scene was worse than she expected. A cargo ship had crashed halfway into the bay, its hull torn open like paper. Debris floated everywhere in the zero-gravity sections. Emergency force fields flickered, trying to contain the atmosphere. And there were bodies, so many bodies, from species she'd never even seen before. The medical staff froze. She could see it in their body language, the way they hesitated at the entrance. This wasn't like their training. This wasn't controlled or clean or civilized. This was chaos. Assessment teams begin scanning for life signs, the head medical officer ordered, a tall alien with multiple eye stalks. Set up triage stations. We follow standard protocols. Careful, methodical evaluation of each patient. The teams moved out, but they moved slowly. Too slowly. The human could see aliens lying in pools of their own strange colored blood. She could hear the ones who were still conscious crying out in pain. Her body wanted to move, wanted to help, but she forced herself to stay still. This wasn't her station. These weren't her rules. Thessex approached a patient, an alien that looked like a cross between a bear and an octopus. They pulled out their scanner and began the careful process of evaluation. The patient's limb was clearly severed, leaking dark blue fluid, but Thessex followed protocol, scanning, recording, documenting before acting. Zixtik worked on another patient, but their hands shook. The insect alien had probably never seen real trauma before. None of them had. "We need to stop the hemorrhaging on patient 7, someone called out. "Prepare the molecular stabilizer." "It will take 10 minutes to calibrate," another voice responded. The human watched the patient. 10 minutes was too long. She could see it in the way the alien's skin was turning gray, the way its breathing had become shallow. She'd seen that look before. That was the look of someone dying. She couldn't stand still anymore. Her feet moved before her brain caught up. She crossed the bay in long strides, grabbed a medical kit from a nearby cart, and dropped to her knees beside patient 7. "What are you doing?" the attending physician demanded. "That patient is already being processed." "They're bleeding out," the human said, her hands already working. She pulled out supplies, looking for something, anything she could use. "They have maybe 3 minutes before shock sets in completely." "We have procedures. Your procedures are too slow." The human found what she was looking for, a roll of synthetic bandaging. Not ideal, but it would work. She pressed it directly against the wound, applying hard pressure. The patient screamed. The sound was horrible, alien and wrong, but alive. Screaming meant still conscious, still fighting. "You're hurting them," Kelrix cried out, rushing over. "Pain means alive," the human grunted, maintaining pressure. "Dead feels nothing." She worked quickly, tying off the bleeding vessel with the bandage material. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't gentle, but the blood flow slowed, then stopped. The patient's breathing began to stabilize. The attending physician stared at her. That's barbaric. You just physically tied off a blood vessel with external pressure. We have tools, we have technology, which takes time these patients don't have." The human stood up, her hands covered in blue blood. She looked around the bay. "You have 30, maybe 40 casualties here. How long does each of your careful scans take? 5 minutes? 10? Do the math. Some of these people will be dead before you finish evaluating them." "We cannot compromise our standards," the head medical officer said, but its eye stalks were looking at the stabilized patient with something like confusion. "Then let me help," the human said. "I'm trained for this. My whole planet is trained for this. Let me do triage." "Triage?" Thessex asked, moving closer. Their crystalline body was stained with blue and green and red blood from different species. "It's a battlefield medical technique," the human explained quickly. "You sort patients into categories. Who can wait, who needs immediate attention, and who, she paused, hating this part, who is beyond saving. You focus resources where they'll do the most good. We don't give up on patients, the head medical officer said firmly. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying be realistic. If someone is too far gone and you have limited staff, you save the ones you can save instead of losing everyone trying to save one. The words hung in the air like poison. She could see the horror on the faces of the aliens around her. Their medical ethics didn't include the concept of acceptable loss. Another alarm sounded. More casualties were coming in from other parts of the damaged ship. The medical staff was already overwhelmed. Let her try, a voice said. It was Thesix. The crystal alien stepped forward. I have been watching her. Her methods are crude, but they are effective. And we are failing. Thesix, this goes against everything we've learned, Zixtix said, all their hands gesturing in agitation. So does watching patients die while we scan them, Thesix replied coldly. The head medical officer's eye stalks swiveled between the human and the growing number of casualties. It was a terrible decision to have to make. Finally, it nodded. Do your triage, but I'm assigning supervisors to watch every move you make. The human didn't waste time arguing. She moved through the bay quickly, her eyes taking in everything. Years of emergency room training kicked in. That one, stable, green tag. That one, critical but savable, red tag. That one over there, walking wounded, yellow tag. That one in the corner, no pulse, no breathing, already gone, black tag. She moved from patient to patient, making calls in seconds that the other doctors would have taken minutes to evaluate. Behind her, she could hear gasps of shock as she marked some patients as beyond saving. Could hear the whispers about the brutal human, the Deathworlder with no compassion. But she also heard something else. The sounds of the red tag patients getting immediate attention. The sounds of people being saved. I need help here, she called out, kneeling beside an alien with a crushed thorax. This one needs a chest seal, or whatever passes for it in this species. Now! Kelrix flowed over, their watery form hesitant. I don't know how to. I'll teach you. Watch. The human's hands worked quickly, showing the procedure. See? You're creating an airtight seal. It's stopping the air from escaping the chest cavity. Basic, simple, effective. But it's so crude, Kelrix whispered. Crude and alive beats sophisticated and dead every single time, the human said. Trust me, this patient will thank us later. More medical students gathered around her, watching her work. She became a teaching machine, showing them fast, practical techniques that their academy had never covered. How to stop bleeding with direct pressure. How to clear an airway manually. How to stabilize a spine with nothing but padding and tape. On my world, she said as she worked, we have a saying, the golden hour. That's how long you have after a major trauma before the chances of survival drop dramatically. Every second counts. You don't have time to be gentle. You have time to be effective. Thesix worked beside her now, their delicate crystalline hands learning to apply firm pressure to wounds. This feels wrong, they said. I know, the human replied. It should feel wrong. We're hurting people to save them. But sometimes that's what medicine is. An hour passed, then two. The human lost track of time, moving from patient to patient. Her clothes were soaked with blood of colors she didn't have names for. Her hands shook from exhaustion. But the tide was turning. Fewer people were dying. More were stabilizing. Finally, the last critical patient was moved to intensive care. The human stood in the middle of the docking bay, surrounded by used medical supplies and the organized chaos she'd created. The orderly triage system had worked. The numbers proved it. The head medical officer approached her slowly. Preliminary counts show we saved 17 more patients than our statistical models predicted. 17 lives that should have been lost. 18, the human corrected quietly. Patient 7, the one I treated first. Your model had marked them as non-viable. The officer's eye stalks drooped. Yes, 18. But at what cost? Another doctor asked, looking at the black tag section. You decided who lived and who died. No, the human said firmly. I decided who I could save and who was already gone. There's a difference. Zixtic approached her, multiple arms wrapped around their thorax in what might have been a self-hug. I couldn't do what you did today, making those choices, being so brutal, the human offered. I was going to say brave. The human looked around at the medical bay, at the saved patients being carefully moved to recovery areas. There's nothing brave about it. On Earth, we don't have a choice. Our world tries to kill us every day. Diseases, predators, weather, accidents. If we weren't aggressive in our medicine, we'd have gone extinct a long time ago. Perhaps, Thesic said thoughtfully, their crystalline form reflecting the emergency lights. There is something to be learned from Deathworld medical practices after all. Before anyone could respond, new alarms began to sound. But these were different, longer, more urgent. The humans saw the color drain from the aliens' faces, saw them back away from their stations with something that looked like primal terror. What is it? She asked. What's wrong? The head medical officer's voice was barely a whisper. Quarantine breach, Sector 7, unknown pathogen, medical emergency, level 10. The human frowned. Level 10? What does that mean? Thesix's voice was hollow. It means a disease that could kill everyone on this station, and by protocol, we're supposed to seal the infected section and wait for it to burn itself out. Wait for it to... The human's eyes widened. You mean abandon everyone in that sector? Just let them die? It's the only way to save the station. The human looked at the medical staff, at their faces filled with resignation and horror. They were already accepting it, already preparing to sacrifice whoever was trapped in Sector 7. She thought about Earth, about the plagues that had swept across her world, about the doctors who had rushed into the hot zones, not away from them. No, she said quietly. Then louder, no, show me where Sector 7 is. I'm going in. That's suicide, the head medical officer said. The human was already moving toward the equipment lockers, looking for protective gear. On Earth, we have another saying, first, do no harm. But sometimes the greatest harm is doing nothing at all. Behind her, she heard footsteps, multiple footsteps. She turned to see Thesix, Kelrix, and Zixtic following her. If you're going, Thesix said, teach us how Deathworlders fight plagues. The human felt something tight in her chest loosen. She wasn't alone in this. Maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. All right, she said. Lesson 1. When your world is trying to kill you, you have to be willing to kill it right back. The protective gear locker was designed for species of all shapes and sizes. The human grabbed a suit built for bipeds, checking it quickly for tears or damage. Behind her, Thesix, Kelrix, and Zixtic were doing the same, though their movements were uncertain, afraid. Have any of you done outbreak response training? The human asked as she sealed her suit. 3 negative responses in 3 different alien languages. She'd expected as much. Okay, listen carefully. Once we're in there, we don't touch our faces. We don't remove any part of our suits. We assume everything is contaminated. Everything. If someone gets exposed, they stay in the hot zone. No exceptions. That's horrible, Kelrix said, their watery form rippling with distress inside their suit. That's survival, the human corrected. She pulled up a station map on her wrist display. Sector 7 was a residential area. Families lived there. Children. How many people are in that sector? 247, Thesix answered, their voice tight with fear. From 32 different species. And how long until the station seals it off completely? Protocol says 30 minutes to evacuate anyone who isn't showing symptoms. Then the sector locks down permanently. The human did the math in her head. 30 minutes to evacuate the healthy, leaving the sick to die. It was practical from a quarantine standpoint. It was also monstrous. "We need to move faster," she said, breaking into a run. The others followed. They reached Sector 7's entrance to find it already surrounded by security drones. A medical team in full containment suits was setting up a decontamination zone just outside the sealed doors. The head medical officer was there, multiple eye stalks focused on a holographic display showing the sector's internal sensors. "What are you doing here?" the officer demanded when it saw them. "Going in to help," the human said simply. "Absolutely not. You're students. This is a level 10 biohazard. On my planet, medical students respond to outbreaks all the time. We have experience with epidemics. Do you?" The human stared at the officer, not backing down. "How many plagues has this station handled?" The officer's eye stalks drooped. "None. We've had minor illness outbreaks, but nothing like this. Our sterilization systems usually catch everything." "Usually isn't good enough right now. Let us help." After a long pause, the officer gestured to the sealed door. "The sick are concentrated in the residential commons. Early symptoms include respiratory distress, skin discoloration, and neurological effects. It's spreading fast. We estimate 60% of the sector population is already infected." The human's stomach dropped. 60% in just hours. That was aggressive, even by Earth standards. But she kept her expression neutral. Fear was contagious, and right now she needed her team focused. "What about the pathogen itself? Do we know what it is?" "Unknown origin. It was released when the cargo ship crashed. We believe it came from a sealed container that was being transported for study. The species that sealed it is now extinct." "Great," the human muttered. "An ancient plague that killed its entire host species. That's exactly what we need right now." She turned to her study group. 3 pairs of alien eyes stared back at her through protective visors. They were terrified, but they hadn't run. That took courage. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "We go in, we assess the situation, and we set up a field hospital. We separate the sick by symptom severity. We identify any patterns in who's getting sick and who's not. Some species might be immune or resistant. That information could save lives." "What if we all die in there?" Zixtic asked, their voice a barely audible buzz. "Then we die doing our jobs," the human said. She didn't sugarcoat it. They deserved honesty. "But I don't plan on dying today. On Earth, we've beaten plagues that killed half our population. We've survived diseases that should have made us extinct, and we did it with less technology than you have here. We can do this." The officer gave them access codes. The door to Sector 7 hissed open, releasing a wave of stale air. The smell, even through their suit filters, was wrong. Chemical and biological mixed together. Inside, the sector was chaos. Aliens lay in the corridors, too sick to move. Some were coughing, their skin turning colors that didn't match their species. Others were convulsing. A few were already still, their bodies cooling. "Oh, stars," Kelrix whispered. "There are so many." "Focus," the human ordered. "Thesix, start documenting which species are affected and how. Kelrix, you're good with biology. Start taking samples from the sick. We need to understand this pathogen. Zixtic, you have multiple arms. You're with me on patient care." They split up, each moving to their assigned tasks. The human approached the nearest patient, a small, furry alien curled in a ball. She checked for vital signs. Weak pulse, shallow breathing, fever, sick, but not critical yet. She moved to the next patient, then the next, rapidly assessing and categorizing. Her mind flashed back to her training on Earth, to the epidemic simulations they'd run. This was bigger, worse, but the principles were the same. "Human," Thesix called out. "I'm seeing a pattern. The carbon-based species are getting sick first. The silicon-based ones are showing fewer symptoms." "Good, that's good," the human shouted back. "Keep tracking it. See if there are any other correlations." An alien stumbled toward them, a tall being with too many joints. Its skin was turning a sickly yellow, and its eyes were unfocused. "Help me," it rasped. "Please help me." The human caught it as it fell, easing it to the ground. "I've got you. We're going to help everyone we can." But even as she said the words, she could see more patients crashing. The disease was accelerating. Whatever it was aggressive and fast-moving. On Earth, they had names for diseases like this: hemorrhagic fevers, fast plagues, killers. "We need to slow this down," she said, thinking out loud. "We need to understand how it spreads. Airborne? Contact? Fluid transfer?" "All of them, I think," Kelrix called from where they were collecting samples. "The molecular structure suggests it's incredibly adaptive. It can survive in multiple transmission modes." "Of course it can," the human muttered. "An ancient super plague that killed an entire species. Why wouldn't it be adaptable?" Zixtic scuttled over, their multiple arms full of medical supplies. "I found a storage unit with basic equipment. Not much, but something." "Good work. Start setting up stations. Group patients by symptom severity. Red for critical, yellow for serious, green for mild symptoms." "The triage system again?" Thesix asked. "It works in disasters. This is a disaster." They worked together, establishing order in chaos. The humans showed them how to maximize limited resources, how to make hard decisions about who got treatment first. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. An hour in, she noticed something. A small alien child, barely knee-high, sitting in a corner. The child was surrounded by sick adults, but looked healthy. Curious, she approached. "Hey there," she said gently, kneeling down. "How are you feeling?" The child responded in a language she didn't understand, but its body language was clear. Not sick. Scared, but not sick. She scanned the child with her medical scanner. No fever, no symptoms, nothing. "Thesix," she called. "What species is this child?" Thesix looked over. "Nivarian. They're a rare species. Only a few thousand left in the galaxy." "Are there other Nivarians in this sector?" "Checking." Thesix worked their datapad. "Yes, 7 adults, 3 children, all in this residential block." "Find them. Check them all. I think they might be immune." 20 minutes later, they had the answer. Every Nivarian in the sector was healthy. Not just healthy, but completely unaffected by the pathogen. While other species died around them, the Nivarians showed 0 symptoms. "This is it," the human said, excitement cutting through her exhaustion. "This is how we beat it. We need to figure out what makes the Nivarians immune and synthesize it." "That could take weeks," Kelrick said. "We don't have weeks." "Then we work faster." The human looked around at the dying aliens, at her study group covered in sweat and alien blood inside their suits. "On Earth, we've developed vaccines in days when we had to. We've created treatments from scratch under pressure. It's what we do." "But we're not on Earth," Zixtic said quietly. "We're in space, in a sealed station. If this gets out of Sector 7, it won't," the human said with more confidence than she felt. "We're going to contain it, understand it, and stop it. That's the plan." "And if we can't?" Thesix asked. The human was silent for a moment. She thought about Earth, about the plagues that had wiped out cities, about the doctors who had fought and died trying to stop them. "Then we die trying, but we don't give up, never give up." She collected blood samples from a Nivarian adult, handling the vials carefully. "Kelrix, can you analyze this? Look for anything unusual in the immune response, anything we can use." "I'll try, but I'm not an expert in rapid analysis." "You're learning on the job. Welcome to emergency medicine, Deathworld style." While Kelrix worked on the samples, the human continued treating patients. She taught Thesix and Zixtic how to manage symptoms, how to keep patients comfortable when there was no cure yet. Palliative care, Earth doctors called it, making peace with death while still fighting for life. A critical patient crashed. An elderly alien with respiratory failure. The human rushed over, her hands working on instinct. She needed to intubate, needed to get air into the lungs. But she didn't have proper equipment. She had to improvise. "Thesix, I need a tube, any tube, something I can use as an airway." Thesix brought her tubing from a water system. Not medical grade, but sterile enough. The human modified it quickly, then performed the procedure. It was rough, uncomfortable for the patient, but it worked. Air flowed. The patient stabilized. You just stuck a tube down their throat," Zixtic said, sounding faint. "It's called intubation. It's common emergency procedure on Earth. Sometimes you have to invade the body to save it." "That's barbaric." "That's medicine," the human corrected. She was getting tired of explaining this. "Look, I know our methods seem brutal to you. They seem brutal to us too sometimes. But humans learned a long time ago that nature doesn't care about our feelings. Diseases don't care if we think a treatment is too aggressive. They just kill. So we learn to fight back with everything we have." She stood up, looking around the makeshift field hospital they'd created. "On Earth, we have a history written in scars. Plagues that killed millions. We survived by being tough, by being willing to do whatever it took. Not because we're cruel, but because we refuse to accept death as inevitable." "Human," Kelrix called out. "I think I found something." The human rushed over. Kelrix had the Nivarian blood sample displayed in holographic detail. They pointed to a specific protein structure. The Nivarians have this protein in their system. It's binding to the pathogen and neutralizing it. If we could synthesize this and introduce it to other species, we could create an artificial immunity," the human finished. "How long to synthesize enough for 200 patients?" "Days, maybe weeks with proper equipment." "We have hours. What if we just transfer blood directly? Transfusions from the Nivarians to the critical patients." Kelrix's watery form went very still. You want to take blood from healthy individuals and give it to sick ones? Directly?" "We do it all the time on Earth. We call it blood donation. Saves thousands of lives every day. But the risk of rejection, of contamination, is less than the certainty of death if we do nothing," the human said firmly. "We ask for volunteers, we explain the risks, and we save who we can save." Thesix spoke up. "I'll translate. I'll ask the Nivarians if they're willing." 10 minutes later, they had 5 Nivarian volunteers. The humans set up a transfusion station, working with equipment that wasn't designed for this purpose, but could be adapted. It was crude, it was risky, but it might work. The first transfusion went to the child's mother, a critical patient barely clinging to life. The human worked carefully, filtering the blood, checking compatibility as best she could. Then she started the transfer. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then the mother's vital signs began to improve. Color returned to her skin, her breathing eased. The protein in the Nivarian blood was working. "It's working," Zixtic breathed. "The human's insane plan is actually working." "Not insane," the human said, setting up the next transfusion. "Just desperate. There's a difference." They worked through the night, rotating between treating symptoms, performing transfusions, and monitoring patients. It was exhausting, grueling work. The human lost track of time, lost track of how many patients they treated. All that mattered was the next patient, the next life to save. Finally, as Sector 7's artificial dawn began to brighten the corridors, the crisis stabilized. The transfusions had worked. Not perfectly, not for everyone, but enough. The death rate had dropped. Patients were recovering. The human sat down for the first time in hours, her back against a wall. Thesix sat beside her, their crystalline form dull with exhaustion. Kelrix pooled nearby. Zixtic curled up, all their arms wrapped tight. "We did it," Kelrix whispered. "We actually did it." "Not done yet," the human said. "We need to monitor for relapses, continue treating symptoms, track the recovery rate, but yes, the worst is over. You were right, Thesic said quietly, about Deathworld medicine, about doing whatever it takes. We would have lost everyone if we'd followed standard protocols. Your protocols work fine in normal situations, the human said, but this wasn't normal. Sometimes you need a different approach. The Sector 7 door opened. The head medical officer entered with a full medical team, all in protective gear. They stopped, staring at the organized field hospital, at the recovering patients, at the 4 exhausted students covered in a rainbow of alien blood. "Status report," the officer demanded. The human stood up slowly, her body protesting every movement. "Outbreak contained. Pathogen identified. Treatment protocol established using Nivarian blood transfusions. Current survival rate, 73%. Could be higher if we'd had more time and resources." 73%? The officer's eye stalks went rigid with shock. That's impossible. Our models predicted total loss of the sector." "Your models didn't account for Deathworld medical tactics," Thesic said, standing beside the human. There was pride in their voice. The officer was silent for a long moment. Then it gestured to its team. "Begin patient evacuation to proper medical facilities. Maintain the transfusion protocol the students established. And someone get these 4 to decontamination and rest." As the team moved in to take over, the human felt her legs finally give out. Thesic caught her, surprisingly strong for a crystal being. "I've got you," Thesic said, "like you had us." The human smiled, too tired for words. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, with improvised equipment and desperate tactics, they'd won. It was brutal. It was rough, but it was effective. That was Deathworld medicine in a nutshell. As they left Sector 7, the human heard the Nivarian child calling out to her. She turned to see the small alien waving, standing next to its recovering mother. The human waved back. One life saved was worth all the horror, all the brutal choices, all the desperate measures. On Earth, they'd learned that lesson 1,000,000 times over. Now, maybe, the galaxy was learning it too. But as they reached the decontamination chamber, alarms began to sound again. Different alarms. The human's blood went cold as she heard the announcement. "Medical Ethics Board emergency session. All parties involved in Sector 7 response report immediately. Charges of medical misconduct under review." She'd saved over 100 lives, and now she was going to be punished for it. Somehow that seemed about right. The Ethics Board chamber was a circular room with seats arranged in ascending rings. The human stood in the center, still wearing her stained medical uniform. They hadn't given her time to change, to rest, to even process what had happened in Sector 7. Beside her stood Thesic, Kelrix, and Zixtik, equally exhausted and dirty. 12 board members sat in judgment, representing different species and medical traditions from across the galaxy. They looked down at the 4 students with expressions ranging from disgust to concern to something that might have been fear. The head board member, an ancient being that looked like living smoke contained in a glass shell, spoke first. Its voice echoed through the chamber. "You 4 have been summoned to answer for gross violations of medical ethics. Specifically, you performed unauthorized procedures, experimented on patients without consent, and made life-and-death decisions without proper oversight." "We saved lives," the human said flatly. She was too tired for politics, too tired for careful words. "You performed blood transfusions without proper testing," another board member accused, a spider-like alien with too many eyes. "You exposed healthy Nivarians to potential harm. You used equipment not designed for medical purposes." "Because we had no choice," Thesic spoke up, their crystalline voice ringing clear. "The standard equipment would have taken too long. People were dying." "The ends do not justify the means," the smoke being said. "We have protocols for a reason. They protect patients. They protect medical staff. They protect the integrity of medicine itself. Your protocols would have killed everyone in that sector, the human shot back. Your own model said total loss. We achieved 73% survival. How is that not protecting patients? A board member that looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed with agitated colors. You made decisions that should have been made by senior medical staff. Your students, first-year students. You had no authority to do what you did. We had no senior staff, Kelrick said, their watery form rippling with emotion. No one else would go in. They were going to seal the sector and let 247 people die. We couldn't stand by and watch that happen. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good, the smoke being said. Sealing one sector to save the entire station is logical. It's been protocol for centuries. It's also murder, the human said quietly. Dangerous quiet. The chamber erupted. Board members spoke over each other in multiple languages, expressing shock and outrage. The human stood there, letting the storm wash over her. She'd said what needed to be said. Finally, the smoke being raised what might have been a hand, calling for silence. You dare accuse this board of murder? I accuse a system that chooses the easy answer over the right one, the human said. On my world, we had to make hard choices too. During plagues, we could have sealed off cities and let them burn out. Sometimes we did. And every time we did, we called it what it was. A failure. A failure of medicine, a failure of courage, a failure of humanity. Earth is a death world, the spider alien said dismissively. Your species evolved in brutality. Of course you think violence and aggression are acceptable medical practices. It's not about aggression, the human tried to explain. It's about adaptation. Yes, Earth is dangerous. We have diseases that kill in hours, predators that hunt us, weather that can freeze or burn us, and we survived all of it by learning to fight back, by refusing to accept death as inevitable. She pointed up at the board members. Your species evolved on safe worlds, gentle worlds. You never had to develop aggressive medicine because you never needed it. Your protocols work fine when everything goes according to plan. But when chaos happens, when the unexpected strikes, you freeze. You fall back on rules that don't fit the situation. Rules exist to maintain civilization, the smoke being said coldly. Without them, we're just animals. Without them, we're just adaptable, the human countered. Look, I'm not saying your medicine is wrong. It's beautiful, sophisticated, and effective for routine care. But routine care doesn't save people during outbreaks, crashes, or disasters. For that, you need emergency medicine, trauma medicine, battlefield medicine, the kind of medicine humans have been practicing for thousands of years because we had no choice. Zixtix scuttled forward, their multiple hands gesturing. I watched her work. I watched all of them work. Yes, their methods were shocking, painful, invasive, but they were also purposeful. Every action had a reason. Every choice was made to save lives. That's not barbarism, that's dedication. You're defending them because you participated, the jellyfish alien accused. You're all complicit in these violations. I'm defending them because they were right, Zixtix said firmly. I've been studying medicine for 3 years. I've learned all your protocols, all your techniques. And in one night in Sector 7, I learned that sometimes everything we've learned isn't enough. Sometimes you need to do more. Thesix stepped forward. Permission to present evidence? The smoke being gestured assent. Thesix activated their datapad, projecting holographic statistics into the chamber. These are the survival rates for every major outbreak in galactic history, Thesix explained. The average survival rate when sectors are sealed? 0%. The survival rate when standard medical protocols are applied in contaminated environments? 12 to 18%, depending on the pathogen. The survival rate we achieved in Sector 7 using human Deathworld tactics? 73%. The numbers hung in the air, undeniable. That's 33% better than the best recorded response in galactic history, Thesix continued. The human is right. Our protocols are designed for controlled environments. They fail under chaos, and chaos is exactly what we'll face if dangerous situations continue to arise. You're suggesting we abandon centuries of medical ethics? The spider alien asked incredulously. I'm suggesting we expand them, Thesix said. We add emergency protocols. We train for worst-case scenarios. We learn from species that evolved in environments where worst-case scenarios were daily life. The smoke being was silent for a long moment. These methods you used, the direct pressure on wounds, the crude intubations, the blood transfusions without proper screening, they could have caused more harm. But they didn't, the human said, because we weren't reckless. Every choice was calculated. We assessed risks, made judgments, and acted based on experience and training. That's what emergency medicine is, making the best possible decision with incomplete information in insufficient time. And when those decisions are wrong, the jellyfish alien challenged, then patients die, the human admitted, just like they die when we do nothing, just like they would have died if we'd followed standard protocols. The difference is, we tried, we fought for them. We didn't give up just because the situation was difficult. Another board member spoke up, a small reptilian being who'd been quiet until now. I have reviewed the human's medical records from Earth. She has participated in disaster response, epidemic control, and trauma surgery. Her species has survived 12 major pandemics, countless natural disasters, and environmental threats that would have destroyed most civilizations. Perhaps there is merit to learning from such experiences. You can't be serious, the spider alien said. You want to institutionalize barbarism? I want to prevent unnecessary deaths, the reptilian member said. These students saved lives we had written off as lost. That deserves consideration, not condemnation. The debate raged on. Board members argued for and against, citing regulations and precedents. The humans stood through it all, swaying slightly from exhaustion. Thesix noticed and subtly moved closer, providing support. Finally, after what felt like hours, the smoke being called for a vote. The question before us, should these students be expelled for violating medical ethics, or should their actions be reviewed as a potential new emergency protocol? The vote was close, 7-5 in favor of review rather than expulsion. The human let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Not vindication, but not condemnation either. It was something. However, the smoke being continued, there are conditions. You will all remain at this academy under probation. You will document everything you did in Sector 7 in exhaustive detail. And you, human, will develop a formal curriculum for what you call emergency medicine. If the board approves it, it will become an optional specialty course. If we don't approve it, you will be expelled. It wasn't a victory, but it was a chance. The human nodded. I can do that. Furthermore, the smoke being said, there will be an inquiry into why senior medical staff refused to enter Sector 7. Leadership failures will be addressed. That was unexpected. The human looked up at the board with new respect. They were harsh, but they were also fair. They were willing to examine their own failings, not just punish hers. This session is adjourned. Students, report to medical for evaluation and rest. You're all confined to quarters until further notice. As they left the chamber, the human felt the weight of exhaustion finally crashing down on her. They'd survived the outbreak, survived the ethics board, and now she had to figure out how to teach an entire galaxy's worth of medical students how to think like Deathworlders. That went better than expected, Kelrick said quietly as they walked down the corridor. Did it? Zixtic asked. We're on probation. One mistake, and we're expelled. But we're not expelled now, Thesix pointed out, and they're willing to consider emergency medicine as a real discipline. That's progress. The human was about to respond when an alarm sounded. Not the blaring emergency alarm they'd heard before, but a softer, persistent tone. A medical alert. They all stopped, looking at each other. "Please tell me that's a drill," Kelrick said. A holographic display activated on the nearest wall, showing a station-wide announcement. The head medical officer's image appeared, multiple eye stalks drawn tight with stress. "All medical personnel report to stations. We have received a distress call from a civilian transport. Multiple casualties, unknown illness spreading among passengers. They're requesting permission to dock for emergency treatment. Medical staff are advised." The officer paused, seeming to make a difficult decision. "Medical staff are advised to prepare for potential contamination event. Emergency protocols are now in effect." The message ended. The four students looked at each other. "They're going to refuse docking," Thesick said. "Standard protocol for unknown illnesses from civilian vessels. They'll quarantine the ship in space. Condemning everyone aboard to death if the illness is serious," the human said grimly. "What do we do?" Zixtik asked. "We're confined to quarters. We're on probation. If we get involved—" "More people will live," the human finished. She was already moving toward the nearest medical station. "I didn't come to this academy to watch people die from a safe distance. Neither did any of you, or you wouldn't have followed me into Sector 7. Kelrix flowed along beside her. "You're going to get us all expelled." "Probably," the human agreed, "but we'll be expelled for doing our jobs. I can live with that." They reached the medical bay to find it in chaos. The head medical officer was arguing with Station Command, trying to convince them to allow the civilian transport to dock. Other medical staff stood around, uncertain and afraid. The human pushed through to the front. "Let me talk to them." "You're supposed to be in quarters," the officer said, but there was no real authority in its voice. It was exhausted, overwhelmed, and the officer knew it. "I'm supposed to be a doctor," the human said. "Let me do my job." The officer's eye stalks drooped in what might have been resignation or relief. It opened a communication channel to the civilian transport. The image that appeared was horrifying. The transport's medical bay was packed with sick passengers. They were coughing, bleeding, barely conscious. A panicked civilian medic stared out from the screen. "Please," the medic begged. "We need help. We have families here. Children. They're dying." "What are the symptoms?" the human asked, her voice calm and professional. "Respiratory distress, internal bleeding, fever. It started 6 hours ago with one passenger. Now half the ship is infected." The human's mind raced through possibilities. Fast-spreading, aggressive symptoms, multiple system failures. It could be a dozen different pathogens. But the pattern was familiar. Too familiar. Did any passengers recently visit archaeological sites, ancient ruins, anywhere they might have encountered preserved biological materials? The medic checked something off-screen. Yes, a family was doing historical tours. They brought back artifacts from a dead civilization's museum planet. "Tell them to put those artifacts in maximum containment immediately," the human ordered. They might have released an ancient pathogen, something that killed the civilization that created them. Just like in Sector 7, just like the cargo container, someone was trafficking in dead civilization's diseases, either deliberately or through ignorance, and it was killing people. "We can't let them dock," Station Command said over the communication channel. "The risk is too high." "The risk of refusing is higher," the human shot back. "These people will definitely die if we don't help. We might be able to save them if we act now. I've dealt with ancient pathogens before. 6 hours ago, remember? 73% survival rate?" The station commander, a massive armored alien, appeared on screen. "You're the human who violated protocols in Sector 7. I'm the human who saved over 100 lives in Sector 7, the human corrected. "And I can save these people too, but not from out here. They need immediate intervention." The commander was silent, clearly wrestling with the decision. "Sir," Thesick spoke up, "we have experience now. We know how to handle contamination events. We have protection protocols, and we have proven treatment methods. Give us a chance, Kelrix added. Let us try. The commander looked at them. 4 exhausted students covered in stains from their last emergency, asking to walk into another potential disaster. Its expression was unreadable. Finally, it spoke. Permission to dock granted. Medical Team Alpha will handle the response. Students will remain in the bay. With respect, sir, the human said carefully, Medical Team Alpha has never dealt with an outbreak. We have. Let us lead this one. Train Team Alpha by showing them how it's done. That's highly irregular. So is survival, the human said. On my world, we have a saying, desperate times call for desperate measures. Sir, these are desperate times. Let us take desperate measures. The commander's armored plates shifted in what might have been a sigh. Fine, but this is your last chance. If this goes wrong, you're all expelled, and I'm recommending criminal charges. Understood, the human said. Then she turned to her study group. Suit up. We're going to teach this station how Deathworlders fight plagues. As they prepared, gearing up for another battle against disease and death, the human felt something unexpected. Hope. Not because the situation wasn't terrible, it absolutely was, but because she wasn't alone anymore. She had allies who understood that sometimes saving lives meant breaking rules, getting messy, and doing whatever it took. They'd faced one outbreak and won. Now they'd face another, and another after that, if needed. Because that's what doctors did. That's what healers did. That's what anyone who truly cared about life did. They fought, always, no matter what. The civilian transport docked with a heavy clang. The human led her team toward the airlock, ready for whatever horror waited beyond. Behind her, she heard Zixtic mumbling nervously. On my world, we have a saying too. May your death be gentle and your rest eternal. That's cheerful, Kelric said. On my world, the human said, not looking back. We say, not today. Death can have us eventually, but not today. Today, we fight. The airlock opened. They stepped through, and the real work began. The civilian transport was smaller than the station, and that made everything worse. The corridors were narrow, packed with sick passengers who had nowhere to go. The air recycling system was struggling, filling the ship with the smell of sickness and fear. The human moved through the chaos with purpose, her 3 companions following close behind. Medical Team Alpha trailed them, senior doctors who were now learning from first-year students. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Same as Sector 7, the human called out. Triage first. Red tags for critical, yellow for serious, green for mild. We establish treatment zones, separate the sick by severity, and work from worst to best. There's no space, one of the Alpha Team doctors protested. The ship is too crowded. Then we make space, the human said. She pointed to a cargo bay. Clear that out. It becomes our intensive care unit. That passenger lounge becomes moderate care. The dining area is for mild cases and observation. We can't just reorganize their ship, the doctor argued. We're not asking permission, Thesic said, their crystalline form catching the emergency lights. We're saving lives. People can complain about the mess later. They split up. The human took the worst cases, the passengers who were barely breathing. She worked fast, checking vitals, starting oxygen support, stabilizing where she could. Behind her, Zixtic documented everything while simultaneously treating patients with their multiple arms. A child was crying, holding on to an unconscious parent. The human knelt down. Hey, it's okay. We're here to help. What's your name? The child responded in clicks and whistles. Universal translators rendered it as Pix. Pix, I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? Can you help me help your parent? The child nodded, still crying but trying to be strong. The humans showed Pix how to hold their parent's hand, how to talk to them even though they couldn't respond. Sometimes the simplest medicine was just being there, letting someone know they weren't alone. Kelrix was at the artifact storage, collecting samples in proper containment. "Human, you need to see this." The human left Pix with a nurse and hurried over. The artifacts were old, ancient, fragments of pottery and metal from a civilization dead for millennia, and they were covered in a strange residue that glowed faintly under ultraviolet light. "Spores," Kelrick said, their watery forms shimmering with concern. "Bacterial spores that can survive for thousands of years. The family that brought these aboard must have disturbed them, released them into the air." "Can you analyze them? Figure out what we're dealing with?" "Already started. Give me 10 minutes. The human didn't have 10 minutes. A passenger was crashing, their vital signs dropping rapidly. She sprinted back, sliding to her knees beside the patient. An elderly alien with scales and too many teeth, gasping for air. "Respiratory failure," she assessed quickly. "I need to intubate. Someone get me tubing, any tubing." "We don't have proper intubation equipment," a medical alpha doctor said helplessly. "Then we improvise." The human looked around, spotted a drink dispenser. She grabbed the dispensing tube, cleaned it as best she could with sterilization spray, and carefully inserted it into the patient's airway. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't proper, but it worked. The patient's oxygen levels began to climb. The Alpha Team doctor stared at her. "You just used a drink tube to save someone's life." "I used what was available," the human corrected. "On Earth, field medics have used everything from pens to straws to chopsticks to maintain airways. Whatever works, works." Thesic's approached with datapad in hand. "I've been tracking infection patterns. The disease spreads fastest in enclosed spaces with poor ventilation. The passengers in the outer cabins are less affected." "Good work. Move everyone we can to better ventilated areas. Open the ship's external vents if we have to. Fresh air circulation might slow the spread." "That's against safety protocols," another Alpha doctor objected. "We could contaminate the station's air supply." "The station has filters," the human said impatiently. "And right now, these people need air more than we need absolute safety. Make it happen." She could see the Alpha Team struggling with her methods. They were trained for certainty, for controlled environments, for following rules. She was asking them to think, to adapt, to take risks. It went against every instinct they had. But slowly, they were learning. She saw one doctor copying her triage technique, saw another organizing supplies the way she'd shown them, saw a third making a judgment call without checking protocols first. They were becoming emergency responders, becoming Deathworld doctors, whether they liked it or not. "Human," Kelrix called out, "I have the analysis." Everyone gathered around as Kelrix displayed the pathogen's structure. It was complex, aggressive, and terrifyingly familiar. "It's a variant of the pathogen from Sector 7, Kelrix explained. "Same family, different species. This one's actually more dangerous because it attacks faster." "Is the Nivarian treatment going to work?" the human asked. "Unknown. The protein structure is different enough that it might not bind effectively." The human felt her stomach drop. They've gotten lucky in Sector 7. Now their luck might have run out. "Okay," she said, thinking fast. "We need a new approach. What kills this thing? Heat? Cold? Chemical treatment?" "It's resistant to most conventional methods," Kelrick said. "The civilization that created it might have engineered it as a biological weapon. It's designed to survive and spread." "Designed to kill," Thesix added grimly. The human looked around at the sick passengers, at Pix still holding their unconscious parent's hand, at her exhausted companions and the overwhelmed Alpha Team. They'd come so far, saved so many people, they couldn't fail now. "Then we stop treating the pathogen and start treating the symptoms," she said. "We keep patients alive long enough for their immune systems to fight back. We become life support, not cure." "That could take days," one Alpha doctor said. "We don't have resources for—" "Then we find resources," the human interrupted. "We prioritize, we ration, we make hard choices. But we don't give up. She turned to Zixtik. How many critical patients do we have? 38. And how many can we actively support with our current staff and equipment? Zixtik was silent for a moment, calculating. 20, maybe 25. The math was brutal. They couldn't save everyone, not with what they had. The human closed her eyes, making the hardest decision of her life. Triage them. Find the 25 most likely to survive with support. Focus everything on them. And the others? Someone asked quietly. Comfort care. Keep them pain-free. Keep them comfortable. Stay with them. Don't let them die alone. The Alpha Team doctors looked horrified. Thesix put a crystalline hand on one doctor's arm. This is what she meant about Deathworld medicine. Sometimes you can't save everyone, so you save who you can and honor the ones you can't. They worked through the night. The human lost track of time, moving from patient to patient. Some she could help, others she could only comfort. Each death hurt like a knife, but she couldn't stop, couldn't afford to break down. Other people needed her. Pix's parent was one of the lucky ones, barely. The human worked on them for hours, supporting their breathing, managing their fluid levels, treating each symptom as it appeared. At one point, she wasn't sure they'd make it, but slowly, agonizingly slowly, they stabilized. When Pix's parent opened their eyes, the child burst into tears of relief. The human stepped back, letting them have their moment. Saving one family didn't erase the one she'd lost, but it helped. It always helped. Somewhere around hour 8, Kelrix made a discovery. Human, look at this. The patients who are surviving, they all have something in common. The human dragged herself over, running on pure determination now. What is it? High levels of stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, and their alien equivalents. The patients who are fighting hardest, whose bodies are in full survival mode, they're the ones beating the infection. The body's emergency response is keeping them alive, the human said slowly, understanding dawning. Just like humans evolved to do. We kick into high gear when threatened, and it helps us survive. Can we artificially induce that response? Thesix asked. It's dangerous, the human warned. You're essentially shocking the body into fighting harder. If they're too weak, it could kill them. But if we don't try, Zixtik said, they definitely die. The human looked at the critical patients, the ones she thought they'd lose. Then she looked at her study group, at the Alpha team who'd followed her into this mess. All right, we try it, but carefully. We monitor every patient constantly. At the first sign their body can't handle it, we stop. They administered the treatments, carefully calibrated doses of stimulants that kicked the patient's bodies into emergency mode. It was rough on them, stressful and painful. But it worked. Survival rates climbed. Patients who should have died started fighting back. By hour 12, the crisis was turning. The transport ship was still a disaster, still packed with sick people, but they were sick people who were living, recovering. The death rate had slowed to almost nothing. The human finally sat down, her back against a wall. She was covered in sweat and blood and other fluids she couldn't identify. Every muscle ached. But they'd done it. Again. Against impossible odds, they'd won. Thesix sat beside her, their crystalline body now stained with rainbow colors. I'm starting to understand. Understand what? The human asked tiredly. Why your species survived. Why you're so aggressive with your medicine. You evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill you, so you learned to fight back with everything you have. Your entire approach to medicine is about refusing to accept death. Pretty much, the human agreed. On Earth, we have so many sayings about it. Rage against the dying of the light. Do not go gentle into that good night. Humans don't like losing, especially not to something as final as death. Kelrix flowed over, settling beside them. The Alpha team is asking for your training manual. They want to learn everything you did. I don't have a training manual, the human admitted. I respond. I adapt. I do what needs doing. Then we'll help you create one, Zixtic said, joining the group. All 4 students sat together, exhausted but alive. We'll document everything, turn it into a real curriculum. The human looked at her 3 companions. Weeks ago, they'd been strangers, aliens from different worlds with nothing in common. Now they were a team. They'd faced 2 deadly outbreaks together, saved hundreds of lives, and changed how an entire medical academy thought about emergency care. You know we're probably still getting expelled, right? The human said. Probably, Thesix agreed. But we'll be expelled together, and we'll have saved lives. That matters more than any degree. The station commander's voice came over the communication system. Medical team, report. What's your status? The human grabbed a communicator. Transport secured. Outbreak contained. Survival rate approximately 84%. All critical patients stable. We'll need to maintain support for another day or 2, but the worst is over. There was a long pause. 84%? That's not possible with an unknown pathogen. It's possible with Deathworld tactics, sir. Another pause. Stay where you are. The ethics board wants to speak with you. All of you. The human looked at her companions and smiled tiredly. Here we go again. An hour later, they stood before the ethics board once more. The chamber was the same, but the atmosphere was different. The board members weren't looking at them with disgust anymore. There was something else in their expressions now. Respect, maybe, or fear. The smoke being spoke first. You were ordered to assist Medical Team Alpha. Instead, you took command of the entire operation. Someone had to, the human said simply. Alpha Team wasn't equipped for that situation. We were. You risked the entire station by allowing that ship to dock. We saved 218 lives by allowing it to dock, including 43 children, including families, including people who would have definitely died if we'd refused them. The reptilian board member who'd supported them before spoke up. The survival rates speak for themselves. 2 separate outbreaks, both ancient pathogens designed to kill, both contained with survival rates far exceeding galactic standards. This human and her team have proven their methods work. Their methods are barbaric, the spider alien insisted. Aggressive, painful, traumatic to patients. But effective, the reptilian member countered. And isn't that what medicine is supposed to be? Effective? The debate started again, but it felt different this time. Less hostile, more thoughtful. The board was actually considering changing, actually thinking about adapting their perfect system to include messier, harder, Deathworld approaches. Finally, the smoke being called for silence. We have reached a decision. You 4 students will not be expelled. Instead, you are being promoted to a new position. Emergency Response Specialists. You will continue your education, but you will also respond to any critical situations that arise. And you, human, will develop your emergency medicine curriculum. It will be a required course for all medical students going forward. The human felt her legs go weak with relief. Not just allowed to stay, asked to teach, asked to change an entire galaxy's approach to medicine. Furthermore, the smoke being continued, we are requesting that Earth send more medical exchange students. If one human can accomplish this much, we want to learn from your entire species. The human smiled. Be careful what you wish for. You think I'm intense? Wait until you meet combat medics, or battlefield surgeons, or pandemic response teams. Earth has thousands of doctors who make me look gentle. Then we will learn from them all, the reptilian member said. Our medicine has been the same for centuries. Perhaps it's time we evolved, adapted, learned to survive chaos instead of simply avoiding it. As they left the chamber, the human's companions crowded around her, excited and relieved. We did it, Kelrick said. We actually changed things. You changed things, Fessix corrected, looking at the human. We just followed you. No, the human said firmly. We did this together. I showed you what was possible, But you were brave enough to try. That takes courage. You're not just learning Deathworld medicine, you're becoming Deathworld doctors. Zixtik's many hands gestured excitedly. I can't wait to tell my family. They thought I was crazy for joining this exchange program. Now I'm part of something that's changing galactic medicine. They walked through the station corridors, heading toward their quarters. Around them, other medical staff and students watched, some with admiration, some with fear, some with curiosity. Word had spread about what they'd done, about the human who refused to let patients die. The human knew this was just the beginning. There would be more emergencies, more outbreaks, more situations where desperate measures were needed. But now she wouldn't face them alone. She had a team. She had students. She had proof that her methods worked. More importantly, the galaxy was starting to understand something humans had known for millennia. Civilization wasn't about avoiding the brutal realities of life. It was about facing them with courage, intelligence, and the absolute refusal to give up. As they reached their quarters, the human paused at a window overlooking the stars. Out there were billions of worlds, trillions of beings, and somewhere diseases and disasters and death were coming for them. But now, thanks to 4 exhausted students covered in alien blood, the galaxy had new weapons in that eternal fight. Not technology or protocols or perfect procedures, but something more fundamental: the human weapons, adaptability, determination, and the stubborn belief that no matter what the universe threw at them, they could throw back harder. What are you thinking? Thesix asked, joining her at the window. The human smiled. I'm thinking about a quote from my world. Civilization exists by geological consent, subject to change without notice. It means the universe doesn't care about our plans or our protocols. It will throw disasters at us whether we're ready or not. That's terrifying, Kelrick said. Maybe, the human agreed. But here's the thing. Humans have been living with that knowledge forever. And we didn't give up. We didn't hide. We stood up and said, fine, universe, let's dance. We turned terror into determination, turned chaos into medicine, turned the worst moments of life into opportunities to prove what we're made of. She turned to her companions. That's what I'm teaching you. Not just techniques or procedures. I'm teaching you the mindset of a species that refused to die. And now you're going to take that mindset and combine it with your species' strengths. Thesix's precision, Kelrick's adaptability, Zixtik's multitasking. Together we're creating something new, something better. Hybrid medicine, Thesix said thoughtfully, the best of all our worlds. Exactly. The human looked back out at the stars. The universe is dangerous. Life is fragile. Death is inevitable. But between those facts and our final breath, there's a space. A space where we can fight, where we can save lives, where we can refuse to accept the inevitable. That space, Zixtik said slowly, is called medicine. No, the human said, smiling. That space is called hope. Medicine is just one way we express it. The belief that no matter how bad things get, there's always a chance, always a possibility, always a reason to keep fighting. An alarm sounded. Not an emergency this time, just a call for standard medical rounds. The 4 students looked at each other and laughed. After facing 2 deadly plagues, standard medical rounds seemed almost relaxing. They walked together toward the medical bay, ready for whatever came next. They were exhausted, traumatized, covered in stains that might never come out. But they were also alive, victorious, and forever changed. Behind them, the stars shone cold and distant. Out there, the universe continued its indifferent rotation, unaware that 4 students had just changed the course of galactic medicine, unaware that humanity's refusal to accept death had infected new species with something far more dangerous than any plague: hope. And in the medical bay, a small child named Pix played with their fully recovered parent, completely unaware that their survival had helped prove that sometimes barbaric methods, desperate measures, And Deathworld tactics were exactly what civilization needed. Not to abandon ethics, but to remember what ethics were really about: protecting life, all life, at any cost, by any means necessary. That was the human way. And now, maybe, it would become the galactic way too.